Hi, folks. Welcome to Crisco's Corner. Unfiltered commentary. And that's your truth, the real truth. Please like, share, and subscribe. And as always, thank you for your support. Hi, folks. Welcome back. From the Washington Examiner. Senate Democrats bow to reality of voter ID law's popularity. To secure support for a sweeping proposal to change voting laws, Senate Democrats are being forced to swallow a provision previously considered anathema to them, voter ID laws. That's the price of winning support from Democrat Joe Manchin in West Virginia on Tuesday. He joined all 49 Democratic colleagues on a vote for the Senate to consider a bill that would overhaul campaign finance laws, extend early voting days, reform redistricting, and enable ballot harvesting. That's a huge, huge, huge mistake. Reform redistricting. That's never going to happen because both sides try to redistrict to their advantage. That's the way it's always been. That's the way it will always be. And now that the majority of state legislatures are run by Republicans, all of a sudden now they want to reform redistricting. But, you know, when it was a majority Democrat, all you got was crickets. These people suck. Ballot harvesting is real bad. Look at some undercover Project Veritas videos if you don't believe it. Manchin's support meant Democrats voted unanimously for the proposal. I don't know what to tell you on this. I really don't. I'm very uncomfortable with Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema, the two Democrats in the Senate that are against eliminating the filibuster. But the thing of it is, even if they do all these compromises, are they going to be able to get 60 votes? And everybody's saying, well, John, this is a democracy and majority rules and blah, blah, blah. Well, first of all, 50-50 isn't a majority. And second of all, we're not a democracy, we're a republic. And the idea in a republic, the underlying idea of all republics, at least on paper, is the fact that the tyranny of the majority, that 51% can railroad the other 49. Republics stop that from happening. So the 60 filibuster rule, the 60 votes to pass, is not so outrageous. Now, you're saying, well, John, you know what? That causes gridlock and nothing happens. Yep. The way the founders set up the system was, it was to create gridlock if these mental giants, and I'm being sarcastic in the Senate, will not compromise, a reasonable compromise, then nothing happens. It makes compromise. It forces people to compromise to at least get a half a loaf instead of none. But lately, all you get is, well, if I can't have everything, I don't want anything. And we'll just wait till we take over. And both sides have done that, but the Democrats especially. Voter ID law bans will not likely be part of the future Senate Democrat efforts on voting rights. Democrats have long painted voter IDs as efforts to restrict voting, particularly by minorities, because Democrats think that non-white people are just too stupid, or they just can't seem to get it together to get an ID. They don't know where to go. They don't know how to get one. Poor things, you know. God, they're just too dumb. How racist is that? How ridiculous is that? I had a convenience store for 23 years in a very high non-white area. And I'll tell you what, I used to ID people all the time for beer and cigarettes. It's nonsense. 99% plus have ID or can get it really easily. Most just choose not to get it. And to be honest with you, the ones that could care less about getting ID don't vote anyway. It's a smokescreen. Manchin offered an alternative measure to the one block on Tuesday that would require voters to show a valid utility bill to cast a ballot. I am not so crazy about that. It's better than nothing, that's for certain. Manchin's compromise with his fellow Democrats come after a Mammoth University poll released on Monday showed 80% of respondents support requiring voters to show photo identification to cast a ballot. Just 18% opposed the policy. That is something we're negotiating. Baloney. If 80% of the American people support voter identification to vote, to cast a ballot, why in the F are you making compromises, Republicans? A utility bill is not a photo ID. This is what the American people want. 80% is huge. Or as President Trump would say, huge. It's huge. But it is. All kidding aside. You're going against what the American people want. And the vast majority of all races and genders. Something we're negotiating. Now, do remember, our original bill was very clear that you would have to have a sworn statement if you didn't have any ID. So it's not like the original bill was silent on it, said Amy Klobuchar, a Minnesota Democrat and chairman of the Rules Committee. A sworn statement, so what? You're saying, well, John, if you sign a sworn statement, it's incorrect. You've committed a felony. Yeah. In some states, most of it's a misdemeanor. And so is voting to be somebody else. To walk in and say you're somebody else and vote is also against the law. So what's the point? It changes nothing. Back in March, when the Georgia legislature passed legislation reform laws that included a voter ID measure, Democrats and corporations lashed out, calling the law Jim Crow 2.0. I got one word for that. Horse shit. It's not Jim Crow. They have a clue what Jim Crow is. And by the way, Jim Crow laws, they were around for decades, were all passed and endorsed and enforced by Democrats. Democratic lawmakers such as Raphael Warnock of Georgia, who's a real piece of work, denounced the law, telling the Washington Examiner in April, "We were concerned about the efforts to suppress votes. Everybody knows that voter fraud through voter ID is virtually non-existent." Yeah. When you use voter ID, it's virtually non-existent. That's right, genius. However, Warnock, who supports Manchin's voting measure, recently said he never opposed voter ID. Bullshit. Absolute lie. He sees a poll that comes out that 80% support it. All of a sudden now he wasn't against it, even though it was terribly racist and Jim Crow 2.0. These people suck. I don't know anybody who believes people shouldn't have to prove they are who they say they are, Warnock said. But what has happened over the years is people have played with common sense identification and put in place restrictive measures intended not to preserve the integrity of the outcome, but to select certain groups. Bullshit. That sentence means absolutely nothing. And what the hell is common sense identification? A government issued, I'm in upstate New York, I couldn't take county IDs. Every single state has a driver's license. If you don't have a driver's license in New York, and I'm sure all the other states have them as well, non-driver's license IDs. They're not that hard to get, and they're inexpensive. In fact, I would even go as far as to say, since we're printing out money and giving it all over the world and running huge deficits and spending money on useless crap, yeah, we put some federal money into the states and say anybody that is under a certain income bracket can get a state-issued ID called a non-driver's license for voting measures. Not a problem. I don't have a problem with that. Integrity and security of elections, whether they be local, county, state, or federal, is incredibly important. The first thing to unravel a republic is to have the general public have absolutely no faith in the electoral process. That will unravel the republic faster than anything else, even an economic problem. Georgia Democratic activist Stacey Abrams also supported Manchin's legislation and said she never opposed voter ID either. Horse shit. That's a lie. That's an outright lie. She argued that she was against bills that would prohibit voters from using student ID but allow gun purchases, gun licenses, I should say. Well, I'm in upstate New York, city of about 45,000, Binghamton. I was 8 years as a Democrat on city council, got term limited out, came back later as a Republican, and lost in the district that was created because half of it is students from New York City. And those of you not familiar with New York, we are way, way, way upstate, below Syracuse. So a third, if not half, of the votes that vote in the city council district that I was in, and for mayor of this city, are people from New York City. They have no business voting in local elections. They have no business voting for congressional seats. If they're going to school up here and they're from the New York City area, then vote absentee as if you were in New York. I think student ID cards are ridiculous too. You have to be a permanent resident. 15 states accept utility bills as a form of ID, including West Virginia. Despite the consistent popularity of photo ID of American voters and voters in 46 European countries, Democrats do not seem to be ready to negotiate the issue beyond showing a utility bill. 46 European countries. And Europe was exactly what I would call a bastion of conservative values. Photo ID advocates, however, agree it is too easy to forge a utility bill. It's true. They point to the summit of former Representative Jim Moran of Virginia, Patrick Moran, who was caught on tape in 2012 saying it is easy to fake a utility bill with ease. According to Klobuchar, their caucus wants measures dealing with 34 states that passed no-excuse mail-in ballot laws and 6 states that mandate notaries for mail-in ballot to be cast. This massive mail-in voting is incredibly dangerous. Same-day registration, incredibly dangerous. I have zero problem, absolutely zero, showing an ID to vote. I voted, offered my ID, said not necessary. I said, okay. It's not required here. Of course, I live in a deep blue state. And those of you that follow my channel, I'm seriously considering leaving the state, even at the age of 64. I'll be 65 in November, and I'm still thinking about leaving. Folks, this is about power and control. First of all, it's unconstitutional. They have these voter laws all centralized by a federal authority. Even Barack Obama said, and I'm paraphrasing, hacking in our voting and election system will do zero good because it's so decentralized. You might have an effect in a small area here and there, but it's done at the county level, state and county levels, and there's no centralized voting. At least for data banks, for voting. I mean, the works. Yeah, you might break in 1 or 2 computers, but it won't really affect anything. This puts the power into the hands of Washington. It's a power grab, and a permanent one at that. I don't think the utility bill is good enough. Frankly, I could scan a utility bill right now on my copier, put it in my computer, and put in a different name in the top. I can do that in 30 seconds. All you need is 1 or 2 blanks. You can crank out tons of them and then sit there and just, with a computer program, just run list after list after list of people. It's the people that don't vote, whose names they grab, and they pretend to be them. It has to stop. Voter integrity and security needs to be secured as best as it can in a perfect world. Am I happy that Manchin and Sinema, especially Manchin in this case against H.R. 1? Yeah, in its current form. But I'm afraid the compromise, instead of being poisonous, will cause the death of the republic if this passes. That the compromise will be poison as well. It won't kill you. It won't kill the republic, but it'll make it so weak and ineffective that it might as well be dead. So we'll have to see. I'm worried. I'm concerned. I don't think the Supreme Court has the, as my Puerto Rican friend says, the huevos that say this law is unconstitutional. We'll have to see. But for right now, I'm optimistic. The filibuster looks like it will stay in place. We need to hold off the Democrats for a year and a half, and then they will be wiped out of Congress. Wiped. They're going to lose 40-plus seats. Easily, maybe even more. We can only pray. But it's up to the American people to decide. Call your congressional person. And if you live in a deep blue state, call Joe Manchin's office. Call elected officials that are on the fence and say you would do everything in your power to make sure they lose the next election. Voter security and election integrity is utmost importance. Until next time, folks, goodbye and good luck.